The Galactic Council's chamber loomed silent, its circular halls filled with the presence of the most powerful species in the known universe. For over 100 years, the same seat had remained empty, humanity's seat. A throne of polished black metal, untouched, unclaimed, and a source of unspoken dread. When Earth was first discovered, the Council had extended its invitation, expecting yet another species eager to kneel before them. But humanity never answered. They never sent representatives. They never acknowledged the Council's authority. At first, this was dismissed as mere arrogance, the ignorance of an underdeveloped race. Then, after a century of silence, something changed. The Council no longer mocked Earth's absence. They feared it. No one knew what humanity was planning. No one knew what they had been building in their isolation. The rumors spoke of war fleets in the void, of technologies beyond comprehension. But worst of all, the rumors said Earth was watching. With the war between the Zender Dominion and the Avari Collective reaching its peak, the Council could no longer afford humanity's neutrality. They needed Earth's power, or at least their cooperation, before the war consumed them all. And so, an elite delegation was formed, a final effort to bring humanity into the fold. They were given one order: return with humanity as an ally. Or return with nothing at all. The journey to Earth was uneventful, until it wasn't. As the Council fleet entered Sol System, a chilling realization settled upon them. No human ships appeared to greet them. No transmissions hailed them. It was as if Earth was daring them to come closer. The lead ship, the Dominion's Glory, sent an encrypted handshake, requesting permission to land. No response. Minutes passed. Then hours. The silence gnawed at them. High Chancellor Varghese, a diplomat with over a century of experience, paced in frustration. "They're playing with us," he muttered. "They're testing our patience." General Karthak, the military representative, sneered. "Then they will learn what happens when patience runs out." He motioned to his officers. "Prepare a low-orbit show of force. If they won't answer words, they'll answer to firepower." That was when it happened. All power died. The ship's engines, shields, weapons, everything shut down in an instant. Emergency lights flickered. Crew members gasped as their consoles went dark. "What in the void is happening?" Karthak bellowed, slamming his fist against the dead controls. Varghese felt his throat go dry. He had read the intelligence reports, heard the rumors, but nothing had prepared him for this. A voice crackled through the ship's speakers. "Welcome to Earth." It was calm. Male. Deep. Controlled. "Your descent will be managed remotely. Do not resist." The ship moved on its own. The crew watched in horror as their systems, untouched by their hands, guided the massive warship down. It was an impossible level of control. Not just a hack. Not just a breach. It was total dominion. They were powerless passengers in their own vessel. The ship landed in a massive facility, hidden beneath Earth's surface. The doors hissed open, revealing a dark corridor lined with soldiers. They were human, but something about them was wrong. Their posture was too perfect, their movements eerily synchronized. These were no ordinary warriors. These were weapons crafted in human flesh. The delegation was escorted in silence. No explanations. No threats. Just silence. It was only when they entered the war room that they saw him. At the center of the room, surrounded by flickering holographic displays of every galactic conflict, sat a single man. Commander Alexander Grayson. His eyes were cold. Not hostile. Not welcoming. Just cold. He did not stand to greet them. He did not acknowledge them as equals. He simply watched, waiting for them to speak first. Varghese found his voice. "I am High Chancellor Varghese of the Galactic Council. We have come to..." Grayson raised a hand. A silent command. The room shifted. A new holographic display emerged, one of the Zenriavari War. Their fleets clashed in real time, burning worlds, shattering stations. But the feed was wrong. It was too detailed. Not a live transmission. A prediction. "What is this?" Karthak growled. Grayson leaned forward. "A war that has already ended." The delegation froze. Varghese swallowed. "What do you mean?" Grayson tapped the console. The projection zoomed in on key locations. Zender command ships. Yavari supply depots. Targets. "We've already taken control," Grayson said. "Your war is an illusion." Karthak bared his teeth. "Lies. The Zender and Yavari are still fighting." Grayson smiled. Not an amused smile. A knowing one. "They fight because we allow them to," he said. "They fight because they do not know they have already lost." He gestured again. New data appeared. Assassination logs. Explosion scheduled. Supply lines collapsing at the exact moment humanity chose. "You sent spies?" Varghese hissed. Grayson shook his head. "Spies are reckless. Spies get caught. We didn't send spies." His gaze sharpened. "We sent ghosts." The delegation watched in growing horror. The war they had fought to control, the war they thought dictated the fate of the galaxy, wasn't real. Humanity had orchestrated it all. Varghese's hands trembled. "Why? If you could end this war, why let it continue?" Grayson stood. The room felt smaller. "Because we were waiting." "For what?" Karthak growled. Grayson's gaze turned to him, and for the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Not arrogance. Something worse. Pity. For you to realize your place. The room shook. Varghese's communicator exploded with distress signals. The delegation gasped as they saw live footage from their fleets in orbit. The warships were dying. Not in battle. Not from an attack. They were simply disappearing. Crew members went silent. The lights on the ships went dark. One by one, the vessels ceased to exist, erased from reality. Karthak roared, turning to Grayson. "What have you done?" Grayson's expression was unreadable. "We gave you a choice." Varghese fell to his knees. "This is genocide." Grayson exhaled. "No," he said softly. "This is mercy." The delegation was trembling. This wasn't diplomacy. This wasn't negotiation. This was judgment. Varghese looked up at the man who had just unmade entire fleets without raising his voice. "What happens now?" Grayson walked to the empty chair. The one that had remained untouched for over a century. Earth's seat. He sat. And smiled. "You tell the council," he said. "We have taken our seat." The silence in the war room was suffocating. The weight of reality crushed the delegation as the realization set in, they had never been in control. The war they thought dictated the fate of the galaxy was nothing more than a distraction, a game played by an unseen hand. And now, that hand had finally revealed itself. High Chancellor Varghese forced himself to speak, though his voice was barely more than a whisper. "You planned all of this?" His question felt feeble, meaningless in the face of the sheer scale of what had been done. Grayson didn't answer immediately. He merely observed them, eyes devoid of emotion, the measured gaze of a predator studying prey. "We planned nothing," he finally said. "We merely waited for you to fall into the traps of your own making." His fingers danced over the holographic console, shifting the display to a new projection, one of council-controlled space. Dozens of red markers blinked over every key system, every military hub, every governing planet, every hidden stronghold. "You thought your war was contained," Grayson continued. "You thought the battle between the Zender and Yvari was limited to their fleets, their worlds. But you never considered the real battlefield." He turned to Karthak, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, General, how many of your supply chains have been compromised?" Karthak's mandibles clicked in agitation. "None," he spat. "Our logistics are secure." Grayson smiled. "Are they?" Another shift in the hologram, and suddenly, live footage from deep space refineries, war factories, and key supply hubs filled the air. Karthak's eyes widened. The facilities were empty. Conveyor belts stood motionless. Hangars that should have been swarming with workers were silent. Warships, half-assembled, sat abandoned. "You didn't just take control of the war," Varghese whispered, horror dawning on him. Grayson nodded. "We took control of the industry that fuels it." His voice was ice. "Without raw materials, your fleets will crumble. Without fuel, your warships become tombs drifting in the void. Without weapons, your soldiers will fight with their bare hands." He tilted his head slightly, as if considering his own words. "If they live that long." Karthak slammed his fist on the table. "This is impossible. Our supply lines are fortified, your supply lines are a myth," Grayson cut in. "They were severed 6 months ago. We allowed you to function, allowed your war to continue, because it kept you blind to the real war." He turned back to the display, and with a single motion, the entire council's war map changed. The Zender-Yvari war disappeared. What replaced it was something infinitely worse. A galaxy already lost. Varghese staggered back. The markers over key systems weren't targets anymore. They were checkpoints. Every single one had already been infiltrated. Some of them had already been eliminated. The Chancellor's throat felt dry. "This can't be real." Grayson exhaled, his patience thinning. "Your problem, Chancellor, is that you believe war is fought with fleets and armies. You think control is dictated by numbers, by battle lines, by the illusion of strength." He gestured to the holograms. "But real war is fought in the shadows. It is decided before the first shot is ever fired." Karthak snarled, stepping forward. "You're bluffing. You're trying to intimidate us." Grayson gave a small nod. A single command. The room shook. The delegation staggered, confusion flashing in their eyes before the realization hit them. That wasn't an explosion. That wasn't an attack. That was something worse. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms blared through the ship still docked outside. Varghese's communicator flared to life with panicked voices. "Hi, Chancellor. Our systems, something's overriding our systems, static." Then nothing. Karthak's eyes darted around. His personal security team reached for their weapons, only to freeze mid-motion. A sudden paralysis overtook them, bodies seizing up, eyes widening in terror. Their exosuits, advanced military-grade power armor, had been locked down. Remotely. Grayson's voice was calm. You see, General, we don't need to fight you. He nodded toward the stunned guards. We just need to make sure you never get the chance to fight back. The soldiers collapsed, their suits now lifeless husks. Their bodies twitched, helpless inside their own armor. Karthak roared in fury, lunging forward, but before he could take a single step, a lance of unseen energy surged through his body. He dropped to his knees, breath ragged, as every muscle in his form locked into place. You should be grateful, Grayson said, standing now, looking down at the paralyzed general. We could have done this years ago. We could have crushed your fleets, erased your worlds, reduced your empires to whispers in the void. He stepped closer, his presence suffocating. But we didn't. Because we gave you a chance to kneel willingly. Karthak could do nothing but tremble. Grayson turned to Varghese, eyes cold. Now tell me, Chancellor. Will you kneel? The weight of the moment pressed down like an unrelenting force. Varghese had spent his life negotiating peace between warring factions, guiding the course of civilizations with carefully crafted words. But no words would save them here. He glanced at Karthak, the once mighty general now a shaking figure at Grayson's feet. The Council's armies, their power, their influence, none of it mattered anymore. Earth had not just outmaneuvered them. Earth had already won. He lowered his head. His voice, barely audible, trembled with the weight of surrender. We kneel. Grayson exhaled, satisfied. Good. He turned back to the war table, observing the galaxy now under his control. The council seat had remained empty for over a century. But today, at last, it belonged to Earth. Varghese struggled to steady his breathing. The weight of his decision pressed against his chest like a vice, every instinct in his body screaming that he had just surrendered not only the council but the entire galaxy. The war they had feared, the power they had sought to control, it had never been theirs to dictate. Humanity had already rewritten the rules. He glanced at Karthak, the once mighty general who had led planetary invasions, reduced to a trembling figure, locked in place by forces beyond his understanding. Karthak's eyes, burning with rage, met his, but there was no longer defiance in them. Only the stark realization that all his weapons, all his strategies, had been meaningless. Grayson observed them, calculating, his expression unreadable. The Council has spent centuries dictating the fate of countless species, deciding who rises and who falls, who thrives and who vanishes into the void. You assumed your authority was absolute. His voice was cold, measured. You were wrong. He turned back to the holograms, shifting the projections with a flick of his fingers. The vast war zones of the Zender and Yavari disappeared. New images replaced them, council-controlled territories. Every major world, every stronghold, every military fleet was already compromised. Red markers blinked over critical systems, power grids, orbital defenses, targets that had already been seized. While you debated laws and brokered fragile peace treaties, we watched. We prepared. And when the time came, we acted. He turned back to them, his gaze sharp. Without hesitation. The weight of the words hung in the air. Varghese opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. What could he say? That the council would resist? That they could rebuild? That was a lie. They had spent too long under the illusion that they held dominion over the stars. They had been blind to the storm forming beyond their reach. Grayson exhaled slowly. Your fleet in orbit was your final attempt to test us. His tone remained neutral, but the implied consequence was clear. It no longer exists. Karthak let out a strangled growl, his muscles barely twitching against the unseen force holding him in place. You think you can rule like this? Through fear? You think the other species will accept your— No, Grayson interrupted smoothly. We don't expect them to accept it. He stepped closer, his presence a shadow looming over them. We expect them to understand. With another flick of his hand, the projection shifted again. Live feed from across the galaxy. Council members, planetary leaders, military officers, all watching the same transmission. This transmission. Varghese' stomach sank. This wasn't just a negotiation. It was a demonstration. The galaxy was witnessing the moment their rulers fell. The council governed through bureaucracy. Through fear of unity. Through the illusion of control. Grayson's voice was steady, unwavering. Humanity governs through precision. He gestured to the displays. One by one, council-controlled systems were going dark. The invisible war, the one they never even knew they were losing, had reached its final stage. And Earth had already won. Carfax's voice was raw. You're making a mistake. Grayson met his gaze, impassive. Explain. You can kill us. You can take the throne. But the galaxy will rebel. Empires do not bow willingly. Grayson studied him for a long moment before answering. Empires do not bow, he agreed. But broken empires? His voice dropped to something even colder. They don't get a choice. Carfax's breath hitched. The display shifted again, this time showing a final set of red markers, coordinated termination orders. Every last resisting force, every last stronghold that had not submitted, was moments away from being erased. This is what you never understood, Grayson continued. You saw war as something grand. Battleships clashing in orbit, armies storming cities, flags raised in victory. His eyes darkened. War is quieter. War is a whisper in the dark. It is ending the battle before it begins. It is choosing who gets to wake up tomorrow and who doesn't. He let the silence stretch before delivering the final blow. And we've already chosen. A tremor passed through Carfax. The sheer finality of it. The brutality of a war they never got the chance to fight. The power of an enemy who never had to fire a shot because they had already won before the first move was made. Varghese finally forced himself to speak. What happens now? Grayson regarded him with something almost like patience. Now? He stepped past them, toward the empty throne at the center of the chamber. For centuries, it had remained untouched, a seat of power that no one had dared claim. Until now. He sat. The simple act sent a ripple through the galaxy. Now, he said, his voice carrying the weight of an empire. The council is no more. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the armrests. There is no war. There is no rebellion. His eyes locked onto the transmission feed, speaking not just to the delegation before him but to everyone watching. There is only the Terran Imperium. The galaxy would remember this moment, not as the day Earth joined the Council, but as the day Earth took its throne. The weight of silence in the chamber was suffocating. Across the galaxy, trillions watched the broadcast, their leaders, their rulers, their warlords witnessing the fall of the Galactic Council in real time. It had not been shattered by war, nor overthrown in some grand rebellion. It had been erased in a single stroke by a species they had underestimated, a species that had remained silent for over a century. Humanity had not been absent. They had been waiting. And now, that wait was over. Varghese could feel his heartbeat in his throat as he stood before the man who had orchestrated the galaxy's quiet downfall. Alexander Grayson sat in the chair that had remained empty for so long, Earth's seat, now occupied not as an equal, but as a ruler. The council was no more. The illusion of their power had been torn away, their control dismantled, their fleets reduced to drifting wreckage before they even understood what was happening. He wanted to speak, wanted to grasp at some fragment of defiance, but there was nothing left. He had already surrendered. Karthak had already been broken. Their words no longer mattered. Grayson's voice carried through the chamber, unwavering, absolute. The war is over. The council has fallen. There will be no further negotiations. His words, though calm, rang with the finality of a death sentence. Across the holographic display, the remnants of the council's military forces flickered, blinking indicators of ships, stations, and command centers waiting for execution orders. Some had already fallen, their crews never realizing the moment their fates had been decided. Others lingered, watching, waiting, fearing. Varghese dared to speak, his voice a fragile whisper. You can't expect the galaxy to accept this. Grayson met his gaze, unreadable. Acceptance is irrelevant. He shifted his attention to the display, and with a single gesture, the orders were sent. Across the stars, Council Loyalist fleets vanished from existence. Some were erased in fire, entire battlecruisers detonating before their captains had a chance to scream. Others were silenced in ways unseen, systems shutting down, life support failing, their crews left adrift in the void, doomed to suffocate in the cold grip of space. There was no war. There was only execution. Karthak gritted his teeth, rage flickering through the paralysis that still gripped his form. You think you can rule through fear? His breath was heavy, labored, yet still filled with defiance. Fear doesn't last forever. Grayson leaned back in the throne, his expression unchanging. You misunderstand. He tapped a control, shifting the display to a different kind of war. The aftermath. The future. Reconstruction. Territories that had once been ruled by corrupt council officials, now marked for systematic restructuring. Entire worlds, liberated not through conquest, but through precise, surgical intervention. This was never about ruling through fear, Grayson said. This is about ending weakness. The council thrived on stagnation, on fragile balances of power, on allowing corruption to fester so long as it maintained control. His voice was cold, edged with something undeniable. Conviction. That time is over. Varghese felt his fists clench, but what was left to argue? The council's way had allowed the galaxy to burn. It had fanned the flames of war for centuries, playing one empire against another, ensuring that no species ever truly rose beyond the council's reach. And now, standing in the ruins of their own arrogance, he realized perhaps humanity had not taken the throne. Perhaps they had claimed it because no one else deserved it. Karthak let out a hollow laugh, his voice strained but sharp. And what? You think you're better? You think humans won't become exactly what the council was? You think you won't be corrupted by power? Grayson regarded him with a faint smile, the first true expression he had shown. Power does not corrupt. Weakness does. He stood, pacing slowly before them, as if speaking not just to them, but to the entire galaxy watching. The council fell because it allowed itself to rot. It fell because it chose bureaucracy over progress, self-preservation over the needs of the species under its rule. He turned back to them. We will not make the same mistake. Varghese exhaled, shaking his head. And if someone resists? If an empire refuses to kneel? Grayson did not hesitate. Then they will cease to exist. A chill ran through the chamber. There was no arrogance in his words, no boastful declaration of superiority. It was a statement of fact. There would be no drawn-out wars, no diplomatic games of endless negotiations. If a civilization stood against humanity's rule, they would be erased. Carfax's mandibles clenched, but his fury had dulled into something else. Grim acceptance. You've already decided all of this. Grayson nodded. A long time ago. He stepped forward, looking down at the two remaining figures of a shattered government. This is not the beginning of a war. This is not an occupation. This is an era. His gaze sharpened. The Terran Imperium has no need for endless conflict. We are not here to rule. We are here to advance. The galaxy has lingered in stagnation for too long, crippled by complacency, held back by those too afraid to push forward. His eyes flickered with something deeper, something unshakable. That ends today. Varghese let the words settle. He looked at the displays one last time, at the stars now marked under human control, and he realized something that should have terrified him, but instead, for the first time in his life, it gave him hope. Humanity was not taking the throne to rule. They were taking it to reshape the galaxy entirely. Carfax remained still, his breathing heavy, his eyes locked onto Grayson with quiet hatred. So this is it, then. Grayson's lips curled into something barely resembling a smirk. No, General. He gestured toward the displays, showing vast fleets mobilizing, new stations forming, entire civilizations already being altered by the new order. This is just the beginning. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, the old era crumbled into dust. Empires that once saw themselves as untouchable now bowed. The last embers of resistance were crushed before they could ignite. And as the Terran Imperium rose from the ashes of the old world, the message was clear. Earth had never been absent. It had been waiting. And now, at long last, humanity ruled the stars.